Good evening, everybody, and welcome to The Point. Once again, my name is Mark Heim. We are here on the stream tonight. My guest tonight is Roxanne Hitchcock from Oil City. Roxanne has I was going to say a wild and varied background, but I don't know if that would have been correct or not. But it's very varied, and you got your hand on a lot of interesting things. I want to thank you for being here tonight.
Well, thank you.
You have experience with a number of things like writing and book selling, collectibles, things like that. And we were talking just before we went on with the program here of some of the little nuggets that get uncovered as you do research and you write and you start to look for the little gems that kind of come out unexpectedly. You were telling me just before we started of your latest project, and it was about the city directories that people may or may not be familiar with. Sometimes you walk into a library and you see these volumes and folks don't quite know what to do with it. First of all, tell me what they're all about, and then tell me about your project.
Well, the city directory was actually started out, the first one came out in the United States in Philadelphia in 1785. Actually, there were two of them within 3 weeks of each other. They were competitors, and it was designed to be kind of a marketing tool so that that businesses could use them to market to each other. And because you didn't have telephones, people weren't as transient back then. And then as time went by, it the field enlarged quite a bit. And R.L. Polk and Company was a company that I actually ended up working for a number of years. They were the largest publishers of city directories in the United States, and at the time that I worked there, they published over 4,000 directories across the country.
That's a lot of directories.
That's a lot of directories. And I would actually get calls from companies here and about when I worked for them. For, like, say, an insurance company called me one time, and they were looking for a missing heir in the Venango County area. So I was able to, to help them out there. Nowadays, people use them for doing research, genealogical research. The nice part about a directory is it fills the gaps in between the census years. The census is only every 10 years, with the exception of the 1890 census, which went up in fire.
Right.
So there you have a 20-year gap. And most directories, for a lot of the larger towns, were actually published on an annually or biannually basis. So the enumerator would pretty much go door to door every year or two, and he would update the information. And the best part about enumeration, walking door to door, is he could visit the landscape. He could see whether new houses were being built, businesses were coming up. Especially in the 19th century, a whole block could be taken out by a fire. You can't see that if you're like on the telephone.
Right.
So I actually had an aunt who was retired from the library and was a genealogist, and there was a gap in the years in the Oil City directories, and she wanted me to find them, and I said, they're not there. Because I worked for Polk, I knew that, but you, the researcher, wouldn't know that, and it was just happened to be this 5-year gap. And that kind of planted a seed, and then at one point, I visited the Family History Library in Salt Lake City, and realized at that point they didn't really have a large collection of directories. So I decided that I would, with the assistance of a friend of mine, we would go and visit every library in the state.
That's pretty ambitious.
Well, it was one of these really neat projects I thought was really cool. Couldn't understand why nobody else had done it. I found out real fast why nobody else was doing this. Because there were times I was almost practically sleeping into the car, and then there were a couple of days where I would go out for a week on end. My vacation was visiting libraries, and I remember one time I was sitting in this library, and all of a sudden I had this I just stopped, and all of a sudden my brain had gone down, and I had to go to the desk and say, "Can you tell me what town I'm in? Like, where am I?" Because I had already been to 16 libraries that day, and all of a sudden, they kind of come a blur, and I kind of blanked out. But so my one volume is now going to be enlarged into 3 volumes. It's kind of I like to say 97.3% done. So hopefully we'll be getting that out. The nice part about having it taken so long to do this is that I will be able to not only offer it hard copy, but also on disc for somebody who wants to download it.
Wow, that's
so
nice.
That gives them a savings, and it gives me a savings.
Sure.
At the printer.
Absolutely.
So that's one of the things that hopefully will be out in spring.
Now, history is a passion of yours in many different forms.
Mm-hmm.
You have a very significant book collection, and I wondered if you just tell us a little bit about that. That's an area that I'm not real familiar with. I like books, but I know nothing about the collecting of them and why certain books are more significant than others.
I've always loved to read, loved history, was a history major. I guess my downfall in the book department was as I saw an ad in the paper when I was a teenager, and it said, looking for old books. And I said to my grandmother, I said, well, there's some boxes of books up in the attic. And she goes, oh, do with them what you want. Just get them out of here. And so I carted them down to my car and made an appointment with this bookseller and went over and met him, and it was just kind of like we hit it off. I found out like just how much I really liked books. So I ended up kind of becoming his apprentice. So every spare moment I would spend at his house fondling rare books. I probably drove him crazy because I was a mecca of questions, like, why is this book worth nothing, but this worth something, and
right.
And those are questions I still ask today, even though it's been 35 years. Book hunting, it is kind of fun because it is. I always feel like I'm on a treasure hunt. And when I first opened up my bookstore, my friends hated me when they had to go punch the time clock because I was one of these ones. I really liked my job. Going to an auction was an adventure, even if I had to stand there for 12 hours in the rain. And it's one of those things, where, I might not know anything about a particular book or an author, but then when I buy it, you have to do a little research. So that kind of opens up that door, So books can be worth something for a whole lot of reasons. I will tell you that age has nothing to do with the book's value. It's the subject content.
I wouldn't have known that.
We can, take a look at the economy actually affects the value of a book also. A good example is very few people even today would know who Isaac Dennison is.
I have to admit I'm not familiar with the name either.
But you've heard of the movie Out of Africa.
Yes.
With Robert Redford and Meryl Streep.
Right.
Well, prior to that movie coming out, Isaac Dennison was just pretty much an unknown novelist. But when Meryl Streep and Robert Redford danced across that screen, there was a whole lot of interest. So that obscure book became worth like $200 overnight. And it's like the stock market a little bit. The book has gone down in value. You can find a nice first edition for about $50. So there's always that fluctuation. Just things can become trendy. But the nice, interesting part about books is that there was a gentleman here in Titusville that actually, his name was Scheide, and he was an oil man, and he collected books. And he had probably one of the nicest private collections of the early 20th century right here in Titusville, and nobody even knew. He had his own vault downstairs.
Wow.
In his modest Victorian home. And he is the only gentleman that I know of that actually had two Gutenberg Bibles in his collection at one time.
Wow, that's impressive.
And upon his death, Drake Well benefited from that, and also Princeton University is where the majority of his book collection went. So, the book collectors are out there. They just don't always announce themselves.
When I read, and I don't read nearly as much as I used to, but I do like to read. I scribble a lot in the margins and make notes and highlight things. Have you found anything interesting like that?
Well, one of the most interesting books I ever found when you talk about scribbles, poetry has not ever been one of my passions. It's I can appreciate it. There are some poets I really like. There are some that if it weren't for the book's value, I wouldn't walk across the street for it. Limericks rank really high in that. I have just never been one to appreciate them. And golf is another sport that I just had an interest in it. So golf limericks combined just was not an interesting subject. And I had bought out this estate, and this one particular book, it had a plaid cover, but it was really filthy dirty from being in the attic. And I had a lot of books that I would keep upstairs in my bookstore, and a lot of times I'd just kind of put books underneath my pool table, and when they surfaced, I'd kind of kick them back under there, And, well, this one time, for about the 20th time, this book had kind of worked its way out, and finally, and eBay had just started. And I thought, well, surely somebody out there will like this book.
Yeah.
So I put it on eBay, and the next day I looked, and it was like over $800. And I'm like, okay, my catalogs tell me this book is worth $25, and it's at $800. I'm really missing the boat. But I'm very thorough in my descriptions, because in those days you didn't have the benefit of a photograph like you do now in the infancy of eBay. And I was already practiced in the art of description. And I had had noted that there was a very sloppy full-page inscription on the flyleaf from somebody named Bobby Jones. And so Russ and I were having tea that morning, and I said, this book is over $800, and I don't understand why. And he goes, well, what is different about it? And I said, there's some inscription in it, and some guy named Bobby Jones wrote this big, long thing, and you can't hardly read his writing. And he goes, don't you know who Bobby Jones is? And I'm like, no. Well, I didn't realize it was like the world's greatest golfer. And it turns out that his autograph by itself is extremely rare, let alone an inscription. So a very lucky owner. It went very nicely to this owner out in Washington. As a matter of fact, I made sure I didn't even cash the check until he got it, and assured me he was happy with it, because I was holding my breath, going, surely he's going to find something wrong with this book, So, there was a lesson learned, Next time I do a little research, don't look for Robert, look for Bobby Jones. Yeah, so that's an interesting story, so, yeah.
Well, I've, this year, I think it was this year, was it this year or late last year, you reopened your shop?
It, actually, I reopened the Latonia, and, when I started working on the building, people were coming in, and I had been dragging some antiques from home and kind of dressing up the front window. Hadn't even really priced them. I mean, I was just sticking them in there, and then a lot of friends were approaching me and telling me how much they had missed my bookstore. And so I talked it over with my partner Terry, and I said, well, that's what I did for 30 years before I bought the Latonia. I do know how to do that, sell books. So. I don't have any to sell right now, but we have the space. So,
well, I think the thing that I've enjoyed the most is you do have that display case out at the very front of the Latonia, and it gets changed on a rather frequent basis too. And I always like to see what is going to go out there next, because you kind of theme them, if I remember correctly.
Well, the thing that's going on right now is, if you notice, there's a lot of ethnic items in there. And what had happened is I was walking the dog one day and met a new neighbor, and they said, well, geez, the owner had left all these books in the attic. Would you like to come look at them? And I said, oh, absolutely. And, of course, when I'm going up to the attic and I saw all these things, and they're like, oh, these were in the house when you left them. Like, make a pile and we'll negotiate. And, of course, I knew nothing about things, and so I brought them home, and one of the interesting items was a Maasai shield with two lion spears, and then as the homeowner was helping me carry stuff out to the car, and he was carrying the Maasai shield, and because it had been cross-pointed and hanging over the fireplace, He goes, "Oh, this fell off the shield. I hadn't even seen it." And he goes, "I don't know what it is." And it looked like some little broom thing. And I thought, "Well, I don't know what it is." I took it home. The cats liked it immediately, and then I thought, okay, they like it too well, so I locked it in the library, and then I discovered that it was actually part of a lion's mane with a carved whisk. Yeah. I thought, okay, no wonder they like that. And so that's one of those things where you get to do a little research. So I learned a little bit about the Maasai. You know, they're relative to the Zulus. And it is tribal custom in order for a young man to achieve his adulthood, he has to kill a lion. Now, mind you, that the only thing between him and the lion is a spear
and a shield,
and this little water buffalo shield, which is 2 centimeters thick. I would want more between me and the lion than that, but they're braver than I am. So that's what they had to do, and then they would save a piece of the lion's mane, and then of course I have the warrior's belt. What they do now, because obviously just like the United States, the population has exploded. What they do now to preserve the lions is they actually do a tribal hunt instead of one individual going out and killing the lion. The tribal boys go out together and do that, so that maintains the lion population a little bit. Wow! But that was kind of a neat thing, and then there was a lot of Aztec items and things like that. Excuse me. So that's been it's been getting quite the attention.
It's an interesting thing to see. It really is, and I enjoy. You have a room back there that looks like a library. I guess you have a table and a chair in there, and I find that to be just fascinating. It just looks like a real old-timey Victorian library almost. Just really quaint, very nicely done. When I visited the other day, you mentioned something about playing bookstore music too. So it's a nice experience to wander in there, and that building has an awful lot of character all by itself. When we come back from our break, I want to talk a little bit about the Latonia and some of the work that you've done with it, and some of the unique features like the tree that's growing on the roof.
Oh my goodness, that's a Latonia garden.
We'll be talking more with Roxanne Hitchcock when we come back in just a moment or two.
Celebrate the great outdoors with Outdoor Channel and Armstrong at the Antlers and Anglers Sportsman's Showcase at the Crawford County Fairgrounds. From hunting and fishing to hiking and water sports, Antlers and Anglers has something for everyone, including Outdoor Channel star Neil Rohrbach from Ultimate Outdoors, who will be on hand to meet the fans.
That's what I'm talking about.
It all happens at Antlers and Anglers, Saturday and Sunday, October 6th and 7th at the Crawford County Fairgrounds. Catch Outdoor Channel on Channel 460 on Armstrong.
There are a lot of misconceptions about counseling. The professionals at Rural Mental Health Associates want to set the record straight. Depression is a real illness and carries with it a high cost in terms of relationship problems, family suffering, and diminished work and school performance. Like adults, children experience stress in their lives. Often they act out what's bothering them. Counseling can teach coping skills. For more information, contact Rural Mental Health Associates today. Donovan and Bauer Auto Group is your home for Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. Our lot is filled with new and pre-owned vehicles, and if it's not on the lot, Ronnie the Ram will make sure the staff can find it. At Donovan and Bauer Chrysler, you can expect to find service after the sale with maintenance from their service department and their on-location collision center. Visit us online at www.donovanbauerautogroup.com to find your next Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, or Ram, or other pre-owned vehicle. Donovan and Bauer Auto Group on the Hightown Road, Titusville. For over 110 years, Farmers National Bank has been committed to the communities we serve. And being a part of the Titusville community, that commitment has grown stronger. We at Farmers strive to be and do more for our customers and our communities by offering competitive products and local decision-making capabilities. We invite you to visit our Titusville office and speak with Branch Manager John Danzer and Regional Manager Lance Titus regarding all of your banking needs. Come home to Farmers National Bank. Donovan and Bauer Auto Group is gearing up for the fall sports season, and this year they've enlisted the help of legendary legendary coach, Ronnie the Ram. Coach Ronnie is using advanced training techniques to whip the sales team in shape. These drills will allow Donovan and Bauer to take down their competition using advanced sales training like no-pressure sales, knowledgeable service and sales departments, and straightforward, no-nonsense financing. Join the team and get in the game by visiting Coach Ronnie the Ram and the entire staff at Donovan and Bauer Auto Group on the Hightown Road in Titusville.
Hi, this is Chris Feely, proprietor of the Lunchbox Deli at 115 West Central Avenue. I wear many shirts in the community, but the one that I'm most proud of is the brown and gold. Through hard work and dedication, our student athletes learn commitment, leadership, and communications. So I ask you, as a fan of the brown and gold, to go out and support our Rockets, whether it's on the course, on the court, or in the field. And above all, go Rockets!
Welcome back to The Point, everyone. My name is Mark Heim. We have Roxanne Hitchcock from Oil City, owner of the Latonia Theater in Oil City. We're going to talk about that for a little bit. We've been having a wonderful conversation. We spanned everything from collecting books to Zulu shields, or Maasai shields, sorry. Tell me a little bit about the Latonia. Why did it interest you so much in the first place? Well,
when I was younger, it was one of those places where everybody seems to have fond memories. My mother would go to the matinees there as a young person, and so she had fond memories. And I had a bookstore half a block away, and I love architecture. And I have to say, I'm not one of these, great fans of Victorian architecture, even though Oil City is blessed with it. I've always liked the Art Deco time period, and I used to just love looking at the outside of the building. And as a matter of fact, when I had my bookstore, I would go visit the massage therapist there. And then even after I had semi-retired from the book business, I still went to the massage therapist. And about 6 years ago, it's about 5.5 years ago, I went in, and she said to me, she would tell me, the chandelier's still hanging there, which really meant nothing to me because I had never gone to the movies there. I didn't move there until after the theater had closed. So this one day, after having a massage, she said, "The door's open, you should go upstairs and check it out." So I borrowed a flashlight. It was just a tiny little flashlight. And I'm sneaking up the stairs past butlers, candy, because they were kind of like the police of the area. And I went up into this massive room, and I shined my light up and went, oh my God. My heart just started thumping. And I kind of stood there for a minute, and then I went up and I kind of sat and looked at it, and then I went over and I grabbed my best friend at work, and I said, "Oh, you've got to see this." And from that point on, I just fell in love with the building and decided that I had to have it. And then, a few months went by, and I thought, okay, I guess it's time. And so I went across the street to Gates and Burns, and they looked up the number of the owner, and they called him up and said, do you want to sell your building? And he said, well, I hadn't really thought about it, but sure. So he told me what he wanted, and I said, well, I'm standing right here. We'll write out a check for a deposit, and we'll do everything. And
the rest is almost history.
Yeah, and the rest is history. So I always tell people I bought a chandelier, and the building just kind of came with it.
I remember a conversation we had regarding the building that led to a tour of the building. I'm not sure how it got started, but we were talking about, or I mentioned that some of the ironwork reminded me of some of the things that I'd seen in naval architecture and ships and what have you. And one thing led to another, and before I knew it, we were on a grand tour of the building, and not just the building, but the innards of the building. And from what I saw, that building is not going anywhere anytime soon.
No, actually, it was kind of funny because I called a friend of mine who is an architectural engineer, and I called him up, and after I bought the building, of course, find time to decide to call him, and I said, I want you to come check out the building I bought. And he's standing in the ballroom and he's just looking up very quietly, and he's just standing there so silently. I'm like, oh my God. And he goes, you know, the other theaters in town they're gonna have to go a long way to even catch up to you. And, you know, he just couldn't believe how well built the building was. It was built totally out of steel beams, and if it isn't made of steel beams, cement, or brick, it's pretty much not in the building. Some of those beams are a good 2.5, 3 feet wide by a foot. So it's like you say, if there's a bomb or a tornado,
you know where you're going to be.
That's where I'm going to be. There's very little settling. You know, the floor is pretty level, and it's just absolutely amazing.
Well, I remember you led us all over the building, and we finally made it up to the roof, because the feature that you were most proud of, or you wanted everybody to see, was this tree growing on the roof. And it's difficult to see from the street level, or even from a couple of blocks away. You almost have to see it by going up there. And boy, did we go up there.
Well, it was kind of funny, because it was one of those things. I watched the tree even before I bought the building. I watched it and I thought, you know, it's going to be the first thing I do, go up there and chop up that tree. And of course, the first time I climbed up there, it's like, you get on the roof, it's another 15 feet above you. So it's like, okay. It's a little bit of a journey to get to the roof. So it's not like you're going to carry a ladder up there.
This is true.
But I did buy a ladder this summer just for that, just to take up there. But the tree will be coming down before winter. That is for sure. We keep talking about it.
Yeah, that's been a multi-year project.
I know. And it just seems that I get caught up doing the other projects inside, and it's like, oh, geez, let's give it another little lifespan. I actually have somebody who wants to try and save the tree after we cut it and graft it into a tree.
That would be interesting.
So we're hoping it will maybe see a little life afterwards.
You know, the outside appearance of the building has improved somewhat over the years, too. I remember at least the backside of the building along the alley being subject to a lot of graffiti and what have you. And the civic groups in the area have kind of made it their project to help get rid of some of that stuff. Is that an ongoing battle, or has it pretty much...
I think it's calmed down a little bit. The Southside Neighborhood Association has been absolutely wonderful with helping out with the graffiti. They actually make stuff in a can that does help to take it off. But I think it's toned down a little bit, or they may have caught the culprits. But there for a couple years, it was an ongoing battle.
It was pretty rough.
It was. I almost wanted to park out there and catch somebody. But they weren't dumb enough, I guess, to leave their initials. But it has calmed down. So,
what would you say? This is about the Latonia Theater. What would you say is probably your most favorite experience with that building or event that has taken place there?
Well, one of the things that I experienced is this. I was working in the building by myself, and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was sweeping the stage area, the original stage area, thinking to myself that, geez, there's a doorway, one of the metal doorways in the back staircase I needed to remember to close so the heat wouldn't be wasted. And about 5 minutes later, I could hear this metal scraping, and I went up and the door shut. So, okay, it's time to go home. And then things. My keys disappeared. I had left them on a counter back in the kitchen. It was a bare counter, no keys. 3 days later, they were just there again. Or I would totally clean out a room and sweep it out like one of the stage rooms. And I went in one day, and all of a sudden there was a bottle from the 1930s sitting in the middle of the room. Okay, there's nobody else in here, and I've never seen this bottle before. So I invited the orpit.org, Oil Region Paranormal team.
Oh, yes,
with
yes.
Ryan Ashball.
Right.
So I invited them to come, And I actually don't believe in ghosts. I'm going to kind of clarify that. If you've ever seen the movie Frequency with Dennis Quaid, there's this theory of the quantum leap theory where, time is like this. Because after an electrical storm, there is definitely a lot of activity there. One of the neatest experiences I started having is every once in a while, when I would come to the building to work by myself, I would smell this really unique smell. And I couldn't describe it to anybody because it was so unique. And then I started, of course, I started buying and reading books on theaters, the history of theaters, and then I found out that it was a very popular during the opulent time period of the theaters, which was from 1927 to 1932. Going to a theater was meant to be an experience. So what they had was a special theater smell that they would pipe into their circulation system.
Wow.
And that is what this smell is. And I remember this one day, Terry was coming with me we were cleaning up after a wedding, or before, we were getting ready for a wedding reception. And we were walking up the stairs, and she goes, "It smells like somebody's been burning candles." And I said, "No, that's the theater smell. And it will actually come and go as quick as the snap of a finger."
Wow.
So, that's always been, to me, I have no fear of these ghosts. It's not the scary type feeling. It's actually kind of fun. I talk to them, and they actually whistle at me once in a while. Yeah, you got to be a little bit, nerve-wracking the first time they whistled, when you're in the building by yourself and you're hearing this really clear whistle. But it's definitely somebody who's associated with it. And I would encourage people to go to the orpit.org and look at the Latonia investigations, because there are some really neat EVPs, which is the sound transmissions, and this pictures and video. They've been there 3 times.
Wow.
And each time we've had some really, really neat experiences.
It's funny you should mention that. We're coming up close to Halloween here. That would be an interesting topic to explore further.
Well, actually, they came last year at Halloween, and we actually went down to the basement. It was the first time we had gone down to the basement, and Ryan had had a flashlight with him, and he had, it's one of these things that, you learn something new, and TAPS does this, I guess our ghost hunters now. And he set this flashlight down was actually a toilet that was in the middle of the floor, and we were all around it. But we were around the room, but not in close reaching proximity of that. And of course, he had his infrared camera. And when you're about 25 feet below ground, it's amazing. You can hear somebody's stomach growl. So, you could hear if somebody were moving, and it was like dead silence, except for Terry's stomach at one point. Because that doesn't mean. Well, then Ryan's like, "Well, I want to count to 3, and I want you to turn the flashlight on it." And he explained how to turn the flashlight on, and he said, "This has never worked, but I would really, really like it if you would do it for me." And we hadn't been really getting a lot of activity. But all of a sudden, it was like, he said 1, 2, 3, and boom, the flashlight came on. And of course, his camera's doing this, because he said, "I almost dropped it because it startled me so bad." And my partner, Terry, when we got back upstairs, she was like, "I got to look at this flashlight." There's just no way it came on accidentally.
Yeah.
So that was kind of neat. And then this past spring, I think it was this past spring or last summer, we had a ghost hunt with some girls from Erie that came down for a ghost hunt. And it was another one of those nights where we were getting a little activity. I had borrowed a K2 meter, which you can read the electronic movement in the air, and it's kind of cool because you can actually get them to manipulate it.
Wow.
And we were standing on the stage, and of course you got those who were really serious, and then got the others there because I think it's a fun thing to do, so I started talking to them like I do, and I said, "Well, do you like live shows or do you like the movies?" and it was very clearly they liked movies over the live shows. Oh, this is good. This is a start. You know, the K2 meter. I mean, when I say it wasn't just going burp burp. I mean, it was going off the off the Richter scale. So I mean, we were definitely getting a good response. So I started naming off the stars, just a wide range. You know, Ginger Rogers, like Ginger Rogers. Didn't like John Wayne. Okay, like Bette Midler. Well, yeah, like not Bette Midler.
Betty Davis?
Betty Davis.
Right.
Like Betty Davis. Didn't like Barbara Stanwyck. How about Tom Mix? You know, Tom Mix had been to the Latonia. Nah, not interested. Actually, any cowboy I mentioned, we had the Lone Ranger there. Nah, not interested. But I would mention somebody didn't care for Marilyn Monroe. So it was really interesting, because we were definitely getting some interaction.
Wow.
Over some of the stars, and then there reaches a point I think where they kind of get tired of this too, and kind of quit. But
well, it's nice to know that they are at least friendly. So.
But yeah, it's been fun doing that.
Wow, I didn't expect we'd be talking about that, but that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're going to take another break. When we come back, I would like to talk to you about your experiences with oil history. Some of your writing experiences, some of your experiences with your own books. And Oil 150 wasn't too long ago, and I'd like to talk about some of the things that you did for that, too, in 2009. We'll be back in just a few moments with more conversation with Roxanne Hitchcock. I'm Mark Heim, and we'll see you in just a moment.
Titusville chiropractor Adam Middleton welcomes you to the Titusville office of Middleton Chiropractic. Dr. Middleton is committed to improving the function of your nervous system so that you can have a higher quality of life. Through their office, you'll receive the best care through the use of modern chiropractic techniques and technology. Call us today and we can develop a chiropractic plan specific for you. 827-9970. Or visit our website for more information. Middleton Chiropractic, your chiropractor in Titusville. Country Acres Personal Care Home provides their residents with the care that they have come to deserve. The caring staff attends to the needs of its residents, and the home provides spacious rooms and bathrooms. And now Country Acres offers adult day care for those loved ones that need a little care during the day, while also providing respite care. For more information on Country Acres Personal Care Home, please call 827-3708 or visit them just past the airport on Route 27. Country Acres Personal Care Home. Wishing Alyssa, Titusville, and Maplewood the best of luck this sports season.
Colonial Machine Company in Pleasantville is a proud supporter of the Titusville Rockets. The Colonial Machine Company takes pride in their products, working hard to manufacture and supply a quality product that's priced right and made right here in the USA. The Colonial Machine Company would like to wish the Rocket athletes best of luck on and off the field and remind you that you are a product of your school and the community. So continue to work hard, play hard, and maintain the quality of excellence that Rocket fans have come to expect. Go Rockets from the Colonial Machine Company in Pleasantville.
Donovan and Bauer Auto Group is your GM home for Chevy, Buick, and GMC vehicles. Our lot is filled with new and pre-owned vehicles, and if we don't have it, we'll find it. Our staff will help you through the entire process, and we're here after the sale with our service department and collision center. Visit us online at www.donovanbauer.com to find your next vehicle, or stop in and talk to the pros at Donovan and Bauer Auto Group on the Hightown Road in Titusville. It's time to head outdoors and take care of that yard work. And at Morrison's in Titusville, they're ready to help. Whether it's rakes, shovels, wheelbarrows, or decorative stones and backyard accessories, you'll find the supplies and the experience at Morrison's. And at Morrison's, too, you'll find guns, ammo, clothing, and other accessories in stock. Plus, Jim has one of the area's largest supplies of musket and muzzle loading gear. Morrison's and Morrison's, too, on West Central Avenue in Titusville. It's time to head outdoors and take care of that yard work. And at Morrison's in Titusville, they're ready to help. Whether it's rakes, shovels, wheelbarrows, or decorative stones and backyard accessories, you'll find the supplies and the experience at Morrison's. And at Morrison's, too, you'll find guns, ammo, clothing, and other accessories in stock. Plus, Jim has one of the area's largest supplies of musket and muzzle loading gear. Morrison's and Morrison's, too, on West Central Avenue in Titusville.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Mark Heim. Roxanne Hitchcock is with me tonight, and we've been talking about the Latonia Theater here the last 20 minutes or so. And before that, we explored everything from books to artifacts. Another passion of yours is oil history, and you've done some writing on that.
Yes, I got interested in oil history not as a matter of choice, but because when I first got into the book business, all my bookseller friends across the country, because it's a small world out there, insisted that I should specialize. And I said, I specialize in George Washington. The little green thing, you know. If the book sells, I don't care. You know, so I didn't think it was necessary for me to have a specialty. So what it boiled down to was, okay, if I have to specialize in something, I'm in the middle of oil country, so I may as well specialize in oil books. And it kind of took off from there, you know. I mean, the pre-internet days, you know, if you were in Texas and an engineer and you needed this out-of-print book on drilling, on how to drill oil wells, you called me. Mm. As a matter of fact, I remember talking to an oil engineer as he was ordering the book going, why are you called Oil Region Books? You know, and I said, because I live in Oil City, and Venango County is the birthplace of the oil industry. He goes, oh, no, it's in Texas. And I said, oh, no. So he bought the book, and a couple days later he called me back, and he said, I never knew that. I always thought it started in Texas. I said, surprise. You know, so it didn't, so it wasn't necessarily love at first sight with oil history, but it kind of really grew on me. It became an obsession when I would start buying books on oil, and then I would sell them, and then I thought, well, I'd sell an oil, I'd start a little collection, but if somebody needed an oil book, I got it in my collection, I'll sell it, and then finally my partner convinced me that I should probably stop doing that. But it really, like I said, became an obsession this one time when I had a customer call me from Boston who collected Civil War material. She was a doctor, and she wanted me to go to Bradford to buy some Civil War letters for her. And I said, sure. And I showed up with a BB gun while the Civil War collectors there all had their Uzis. I just was not in the same ball game. But while I was there, I found a box, a huge box, just full of letters. And you know, you try not to be really excited and look too close at stuff at auctions because you don't want to bring attention to it. So I started going through this, and I thought, okay, I see Oil City, 1864. I see Petroleum Center, 1865. I'm thinking, okay, this is... So probably had I known what I know now, I'd have probably bought everything at that auction, mortgaged my house, and then been really poor. As it was, I came away with a significant amount of paper, none of them being well, actually there were 2 Civil War letters that had actually gotten in there. So as I was collating these letters and putting them into archival sleeves, I was doing it originally with the purpose that, just more oil material to sell. And then I realized what a treasure trove I had. I had about 10 years of what I call primary source material of a man's livelihood here in the oil region. So I spent 2 years typing all the letters up, transcribing them onto the computer. Then I spent another year indexing them. And then I thought, well, this is really great. This will be my dissertation. Well, that didn't happen, but I have about 5 years worth of research into it, and it really was fascinating. Watching this man's life over this time period. Here was a man who lived in Ohio. He actually, like most young men at the time period, get drafted, signed up with the 11th Ohio Volunteer, went off, saw battle, came back on leave in 63, married his sweetheart, went back to battle, got mustered out in June of 64, or July of 64, and within actually it was June 30th, excuse me, and then by the 1st of August, he's in Oil City, along with most of his company. So there was a particular attraction for Civil War soldiers to come up to the oil region, and I found that to be very interesting. So I started reading all kinds of events and psychological manuals, and and it's interesting because most of these Civil War guys, you're not shooting at somebody every day. Most of these guys would be sitting in camp doing nothing for 20 days, and you march, and then you shoot, and you have a 2-day battle, and then you 20 days of nothing. There might be a little activity in there, but when you spend 4 years over a campfire living in a tent, there's a certain culture that got developed. And most of these guys, and even Chamberlain, who was well known for his activities at Gettysburg, even admitted that it was very hard to go back to civilian life and be a teacher. That's what made the oil region so attraction, because they could carry that camp culture up into this area. So here he was. Now, most of the guys actually would end up at some point when the money dried out, they would go back home. He, however, did not. He was not one of these guys who ever worked for somebody and then saved his money and drilled his well and made lots of money. He was the poor bloke, just like everybody else, that somebody else made the money off of his labor. He always pretty much worked for somebody else, and he moved with the time period, and he was always in the right place at the right time. He was all through Petroleum Center, and a lot of his letters allude to some of the characters that he was involved with. From there, he actually spent a few months up on Bradensburg Road. That area was actually a small oil town up in there, a little boom town. From there, he then went into Clarion County. A lot of activity there that gets very much overlooked, up around the Turkey City and Monroeville, Jefferson Furnace. St. Petersburg actually became the largest oil town, in Clarion County. And he actually spent a year or two in Elk City. So he was actually in the same town that Ben Hogan was at the same time. And then when the oil fields in Bradford opened up, I actually have the letter where his bosses are saying, drop it whatever you can, even if you have to ship your wagon. I want you on a train to Bradford. So he went to Bradford in 1872, and he actually spent the rest of his life there. Wow. And what's interesting is, we read all these stories about the coy little Johnnies and the big gushers, and, there weren't as many of them out there as you like to think they are. Yeah. You just hear the stories over and over that you think they're there. But he was so representative of thousands and thousands of men who came and toiled, made a decent living, spent a lot of time away from his family. He would, his wife's letter would, talk about, she really had a burden because it was up to her to maintain the farm, get the crops in, raise the kids. It was a hardship. And he just wasn't quite willing to let it go, until he actually did bring his wife to Petroleum Center by 1869. Of course, by then it had died down a little bit. It wasn't as wild. Right. Oil, in oil history, we tend to view Pithole as the boom town that did everything. But, it overshadowed Petroleum Center. But, Petroleum Center is where it was happening. Yeah. Yeah. It happened a lot more before and a lot afterwards. So there's a lot of oil history left to be discovered, and this will eventually be a book.
These letters are kind of like a snapshot for just one person.
Yes and no. There are literally hundreds of people that are actually indexed in there.
Really?
When he talks about some of the activity, this is a man who, when I say primary source, this is a man who's looking at the events as it's happening. when he talks about having witnessed a robbery, it's you're right. It is a snapshot, and it gave you a very direct view of what it was like. One of the things that I found quite interesting about him is, when you work a 12-hour shift out there, and you're, after the well is drilled, and he's the oil engineer, and he's taking care of it, you actually end up having a lot of time on your hands. And he would walk for miles to the post office every day to look for a letter from his wife. And he would get upset because she wasn't writing as often as he was. And it's like, no, she's home taking care of 3 kids and your mother and your sister and bringing in the crops. and it's very interesting, watching the dialogue back and forth between them. And he actually was better educated than most of the men that came to the oil region. He was very literate, very articulate in his letters. Actually, I wish I could have brought one of the letters that he had written, because it gives a really great description of coming into Oil City. And I'll have to share that with you sometime.
Yeah, you'll have to make another visit up here, and we'll take a look at those. You brought some books with you. You brought a couple of books with you.
Well, I brought these with me because I know you use this quite a bit doing Oil 150.
Yes, Lube Lingo.
Lube Lingo. It was just kind of one of those little fun projects where I thought it would be kind of fun, especially for kids, to learn some of the language. And I kind of messed around with it. Actually, most of the time I wrote that in the bathtub.
Well, I should probably tell folks the reason I used this is I was working rather closely with the Oil Region Alliance with Oil 150, and I was looking for a way that I could help promote the celebration of Oil 150 during newscasts that I was doing from the radio station in Oil City. So I found this, and there's literally dozens of oil terms in here. And I figured, what better way than to just throw in one of these terms at the end of a newscast. So I think I did that for about a year and a half. And we probably cycled through the book about 2 or 3 times. But each time it was a little bit different, and the context was a little different. And this is just a wonderful little book called Lube Lingo. And you'll find it just about anywhere oil is a subject, at least here in the oil region. So, yeah, it's nice to see this again. So that was a nice project.
Yeah, that was one I really had a lot of fun with. And I think Russ was really glad when it was finally done, because it went through a lot of transitions over a couple of years. One of the characters that has really fascinated me through life was Ben Hogan. And I was very privileged, on top of having, an older bookseller take me under his wing and teach me the book business. I also, as a teenager, I met Ernie Miller, who was a very prominent oil historian from Warren, PA. And we became very, very good friends. He would make weekly sojourns down to my bookstore, and every time he would come, he would bring me a little piece of his collection. And I would go to Warren and I would visit him, and we became very, very close up until he died. And one of the things that he had given me was a workbook that he had that he used back in the 40s. One of the interesting things is his first book was called Oil Mania, and he wrote that in 1938. And I had given him a copy. He had signed numerous copies of books for me, and for my collection. And I had found this copy of Oil Mania. It was a pretty scarce copy, and he said, "Oh, I'm not inscribing that for you, Rox. Oh, I just assume you burn the book. I'm so embarrassed. It was my first work, and I'm really ashamed of it." And I said, No. It has a special place in my heart. And he had a little chapter in there about Ben Hogan. And then after he died, I started going through his workbook, and there was a lot of research. And he had given me some of his files, and he had corresponded with William Darrah when he was writing Pithole, the Vanished City, which was published in 1972. And Darrah had actually started working on his Pithole book in the 1950s. And so him and another historian had corresponded. I have that correspondence from that person also. And it was interesting watching, Dara's frustration over not being able to find information out about Ben Hogan. Because back in the 50s, if you wanted to, read the Pit Hole newspaper, you had to come to Titusville to Drakewell, and you had to read it.
Right.
And if you wanted to look through the Chicago directories for information on Ben Hogan, you had to go to Chicago. We have the benefit of the internet now, and but it's like anything, you have to be very careful. And it's still not everything is still not at. It's still some of it's not easy to access. So I started doing a little bit of research, and like I said, when I was working on my city directory project, I had spent a couple of months working at the Library of Congress. Well, I took a break one day, and I decided I would just look at Chicago directories. And so that's what I did. And so I gleaned them for information. And then I came back, and then about a year later, I thought, well, I got to go do something fun this summer. So I actually went up and spent a couple weeks up in Syracuse, New York, which is where Ben Hogan came from. And it's interesting because my first thing was, of course, was to find the man's grave. And I didn't find it. And I'm thinking, okay, I know I have the right plot. The office told me, but he didn't have a tombstone.
Oh.
What had happened is Ben came from a German Catholic background. So it was bad enough that he became a pugilist and then, operated brothels and dealt faro and ran around with wild women. But, during his time here in the oil region, one of the things that he did was he actually, well known for, is that he had converted to Christianity. There were many, including many ministers, who felt that he had just pretty much exchanged one platform for another public platform, and that he was just using it. That really wasn't the case. I spent a lot of time. The original Ben Hogan book was very, very hard to find. Over time and a lot of money, I actually found several copies. And each one just had a little bit of differences in it. And then as I started, because of the internet, you're able to access more newspapers. So I was actually able to find anywhere from newspapers with articles from, him being in Los Angeles, visiting a boxing match before giving a sermon, or, San Francisco, Salt Lake City. And so I found a lot out about him. Like I said, he came from a Catholic background, very staunch German. So probably the worst thing he could have done in his life was probably convert to evangelical Christianity.
My boss is telling me that we have to wrap this up.
Okay.
So, what we'll have to do is arrange to have you come back, and we'll spend some time talking about Ben Hogan, because that's a subject all by itself.
Oh, it is.
My guest tonight has been Roxanne Hitchcock. Roxanne hails from Oil City, has a number of passions and interests, book selling, book collecting, artifacts, writing, history, the project that you mentioned about the directories and what have you. The two things that seem to come together the most are books and history, and we're going to have to do a little bit more talking there. So thank you for being here tonight.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Mark. I've enjoyed it.
I'm glad. We'll be back again with you, I'm sure, because there's lots more to talk about. On behalf of everyone here at the stream, my thanks to Luke Rio, who engineered and produced this program, and we will see you all again next week on To the Point. The guest next week will be Chris Reber, the Executive Dean of Venango College in Oil City. Good night, everyone.
Streaming live live from the birth